This week is Parshas VaYayshev, and it deals with the story of Yoseph. Yoseph is a difficult character. Tzadikim typically are. The concepts of Yoseph revolve around the issues of rebuke, introduction of new ideas that are not so popular, ascension to a higher level of Kedusha, and the idea of the revelation of the hand of God and the idea of love. The Mishnah talks about arayos and ma'aseh merkava, literally forbidden relationships, and says the chariot of God. What it means is seeing God in this world, and it says that you are only supposed to talk about them with very few people, and only give them hints. The idea is that they are sensitive subjects, and that if you talk about them too openly, it's going to create rebellion. It's going to be counter-effective, counterproductive. And you have that a lot in the story of Yoseph. The Chumash opens up with that he was shepherding the flock with his brothers, but it starts with he was shepherding his brothers with the flock. In other words, it starts out that he's just one of his father's 12 sons, but nevertheless, people are the family is kind of looking at him to get their ideas, and he is the example, but nobody will admit it. And as long as that's the case, everything is fine. Once his father, so to speak, gives him a uniform of authority, and the love of his father is revealed, then jealousy comes into play. And when he has dreams that show that he is also God's choice to be the leader of the family, then you actually get violent hatred, which culminates in the brothers selling him as a slave after contemplating murdering him. It shows just what the barriers to Kedusha and how difficult these subjects are. In addition to that, one of the aspects of Yoseph is that he is a mochiach, that when he sees something wrong, he tells the person, and that may not be so pleasing to people. We all tend to think that we're doing everything perfectly, and for someone to say, well, it's really not, and that you really have to change. And if the person thinks about it, they'll see that the change is in their interest, and basically it's in the works as well. You have the commentaries bring three issues that Joseph rebuked his brothers on. One is the idea of that they were too familiar with the local woman. That tends to be difficult. They ultimately accept the criticism that he brings out, and they basically turn it to good because they subsequently get married. The Chumash goes into the story of Yehuda getting married to Tamar, but you can infer from Ruvain that when he is going to wants to rescue Shimon, who is being held captive in Egypt by who they believe is Potiphar, the viceroy of Egypt, but it's really Yoseph. He offers his 2 children as hostages, but the Sefer Yashar goes into details about how all of the brothers got married at about this time. Another aspect is that Yosef objects to the children of the shafachot, the maidservants, being called slaves or considered slaves or considered being really outside the fold. In fact, the sons of Leah consider themselves to be superior even to Yosef and Benjamin, who are the children of Rachel, who is the preferred wife or the selected wife of Yaakov. Ultimately, they accepted, where you have the story of Boaz saying that it was Rachel and Leah who built up the Israel. But this is a departure, the idea, or a partial departure, from Yishmael, who is in fact the firstborn of Abraham, but he does not become part of the what is going to be the kingdom of priests. It's the same thing with Esau, son of Yitzchak, doesn't become part of the tradition of bringing the light of God into the world, being the kingdom of priests. In the case of Yosef, he says, no, we're all brothers. And that idea is essentially accepted. Lineage still counts and capability still counts, which Yosef has a lot of both of them. He is, in fact, the proper choice to be leader of the family. And that, to a certain extent, is accepted. But the idea that that they are all sons of one man is accepted. In the idea of revelation of godliness is certainly accepted by Ruvain, who subsequently lectures his brothers when they get into trouble about the hand of God is revealed in the difficulties that they had because of their injustices to Yosef. The idea of love relationships is explored with Yehuda, who, when he's saying to Yosef, who he thinks is a foreign leader, why he does not wish to leave Benjamin in Egypt, he says that really that Rachel was Yaakov's wife, that Benjamin is basically his primary son. The rest of them are of a lower status. They're still in the fold. There are still differences, but the change in the way that they look at the family is different. And this is one of the things that Yosef is bringing about. Even though they oppose him and do difficult things to him, and he undergoes difficult situations, it's not clear how much he actually suffers. He becomes a butler in a nobleman's house, where he's treated very well, and then he's thrown in jail. He becomes the chief attendant of the warden, again treated very well. It's not altogether certain how much of an improvement being a minister to Pharaoh is. He's still pretty much a captive then, but in all of these cases, his physical condition is basically pretty good. These ideas prevail, where you see the idea of people denying things that they know, or at least putting them out of their mind, is when Yoseph interprets the dream of the wine steward of Pharaoh. He's in jail with the baker, basically because of frivolous offenses and probably a fit of pique on the part of Pharaoh. They both have dreams that are 3 days before Pharaoh's birthday, and the dreams are consistent with their personalities, where the baker basically considers his labor to be a load on his head, and the best things that he makes for Pharaoh being for the birds. And Yosef predicts that he himself will be eaten by the birds in 3 days. In the case of the wine steward, he's better. He's not a tsadik by any stretch of the imagination, but he's dreaming about serving Pharaoh, giving Pharaoh a cup of wine, and Yosef predicts that he will be restored to his condition, his previous state, his previous job. He also says that it's also his goodness will be determined on if he mentions Yosef to Pharaoh to get him out of jail. The idea is it's mida keneged mida, in that it was the wine steward that trusted Yosef to give him good interpretation. Therefore, he should be trustworthy towards Yosef to get him out of jail, because he never really did anything wrong. He never did anything wrong, period. He's in jail basically because he refused to commit adultery. But to say that to the Egyptians would be a bit much. So he says, look, even here I didn't do anything so that I should be thrown in jail for. The idea is with the dreams, there is a time when people are looking for suggestions, and they could get good suggestions or bad suggestions, and these suggestions will make a difference. If you encourage the person at the right time, it'll bring them to the heights. If you discourage them, it may get them executed. As a result, a person has a debt of gratitude to the people who give him encouragement in their time of need. There's also the idea of the prayers of the righteous being significant, and the attitude of the righteous towards a person. They should react favorably towards that. In fact, the Sar HaMashke completely forgets him until he is brought to task, when perhaps not uncoincidentally, Pharaoh has a dream and he's shaken up, and he needs somebody to interpret the dream. And the Sar HaMashke is then forced to recommend Yosef and get him out of jail. The idea is recognition of the fact that when a good person gives his friend a reproach, not reproach, but it says a criticism, and the criticism is for his own good, that he's really doing him a favor. That he's saying, look, the path you're on is not a productive one. This is the right path. David HaMelech expresses it in Psalm 141, verse 5, where he says, Yehel lameini tsadik chesed v'yochicheni shemen rosh al yani roshi. Okay, he says that the tzadik who's kind should give him a arch, a smack, okay, and that he should have the idea of shemen is the idea of oil for a candle. He should always be a bright person. In other words, he should be able to see the goodness that someone who is advising him and giving him the news that he doesn't find pleasing but is necessary. that he should have the perception to see the goodness in this and even welcome it. The other thing is that a person has to recognize the goodnesses of God towards him. In Psalm 40, David HaMelech talks about being brought up out of the Bor Sha'on, the pit of desolation, and he sees God's hand in it. There's a tendency for a person when they change their situation to say, well, I did all this by myself, when in fact they really did see the hand of heaven in it. And what David HaMelech says is, Tzidkasacha lo kisisi b'toch libi. He says, your righteousness I have not covered up in the midst of my heart. In other words, there are times when people really do recognize the hand of God, but nevertheless there's a tendency to deny it. What he says is, no, he did not do that. He says, Emunas chavet teshuasacha amarti, says faith in God, in God's salvation. He talked about them, he spoke about them. He says, Lo chichadeti chastaka va'amasacha l'kahal ra. He says, I have not suppressed your kindness and your truth among the gathering of the many.